13. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we're now on to page 31 of the agenda. Is that where I'm at? Or no?
Page
No.
18.
I keep going
Going back,
backwards
sorry.
and forwards.
Just keeping everyone on their toes. So I guess just to wrap up this sort of scene setting information in terms of the budget assumptions, just information in terms of a couple of different ways that we have run the ruler over the proposed budgets. The first one being cognizant of a new government in place from November 2023 and the coalition agreements that have been part and parcel of the formation of that government, what impact they have on the proposals that we had included in the long-term plan. And then also, I guess, just the testing of the alignment of the proposed budget with Council's own strategic direction. So I've got Tracy here who has probably been the one holding the ruler in terms of the coalition agreements and the impacts of those across our business. As is highlighted and noted there, freshwater management has been the key area for change. And I guess there's another slide after this in terms of the repeal of a couple of acts pre-Christmas that see us revert back to the Resource Management Act, but importantly, a change in dates around freshwater policy. In essence, I guess the assessment from staff is that the legislative reform will likely add to staff workloads rather than detract from them, at least in the short term. The requirement to stay across all of the changes and movements and assessment of our work programs is not insignificant. The changes within central government ministries, and as we see them contracting, that will likely require additional support and advice from the regional sector. And one of the key uncertainties that we have and has been called out throughout the budget is in relation to a number of our transport activities, which are subject to a new government policy statement that will guide Whakakutahi funding. That new GPS is expected sometime between February and May. But at the moment, without understanding where those shifts and priorities may lie, there is some uncertainty behind those budgets. And so the importance of the assumptions that staff have made in relation to funding in some of those areas is key. Next slide, thanks, Dave. Tracy, do you want to talk to this one?
Thanks, Janine. Morning, councillors. Happy New Year. For those I haven't managed Happy New Year yet. So a lot of what's on the slide is self-explanatory. I shan't read through it line by line. When we get to the Healthy Waterways business case, we have spent some time recasting the policy budget and just go back to some of the comments that were made previously this morning by Councillor Hughes, really saying, look, it is a movable feast. So many things change in terms of our resource management policy program to try and predict in 10 years what it's going to look like when things can change is a bit of a challenge. The Natural and Built Environment Act and Spatial Planning Act were repealed. The enactment came in on the 22nd of December. The key change, as Janine said, is in bullet point 2 there, and that the timeline of 31 December to have the freshwater policy review of 2024 has been extended to 2027. We had already had that conversation with councillors. If the term half-baked's gone is ringing in your ear, I'd said that I wasn't prepared to put something out that was substandard just to meet a deadline. So we had always anticipated taking another 6 months at least. What the additional time does give us is an opportunity to recast and refresh the project plan, which we are in the process of doing. And again, when we get to Healthy Waterways business case, there's a bit of detail in there. Today is the first day that the government is back in full force. I think I heard it referred to on the radio this morning as Super Tuesday because so much activity is going on with caucuses, with a whole lot of things coming together. Also, we have been talking with our friends in the ministries. They are keeping things pretty close to their chest at the moment. With recent links out of central government, I don't think any ministry is wanting to be responsible for having any kind of information link that hasn't been through the proper informal channels. And we totally understand that, given it's the start of a new government and many of our ministries will have to build up that trust with their ministers. However, what we do note, and I note it is on page 18 of the agenda in paragraph 42, we will have an ability through the chief executive submission to the LTP. So I'm not sure, Janine, if we've canvassed that, but like anybody gets to make a submission to the LTP, we get to make a submission. Obviously, we can't throw in a whole lot of new stuff that the community doesn't know about, but it's an opportunity to refine along the way. And once we get there, so next couple of months of the government under its belt, hopefully we will have more clarity. I do want to be really clear with councillors that while we're hearing a lot, we're actually waiting for things that are coming out of government. That's really important. We also have statutory responsibilities that we must still fulfil. So it's a bit of a delicate dance, to be sure, but it's one that we are being fiscally prudent about. Save the detail for the business case.
Or later.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith, did you have a question?
Or do we want to wait for the business case? It's just, I don't know. I'm confused about when we're asking questions and when we're actually at a business case.
We're not in a business case yet.
No, so Madam Chair, I just wanted to signal that there are changes, things are changing. We have already spent some time last week looking at what that change may be, and we will have those refresh figures when we get to the business case for freshwater.
Okay, so Dave, just next slide, please. And the other piece of work that's been done is to look at the budget that's proposed and mapping that against council's strategic direction and the strategic priorities. So maybe if we slip on to the next slide, it might be a little bit easier to see. I guess just a representation in terms of where the investment within the plan actually goes across those strategic priorities. Probably unsurprising that community connections is a tall tower there, given it includes our public transport spend, but with water probably a close second. So just another view into the budget.
And this is just WRC's spend as opposed to, contributions from like with transport from Waikato.
Yeah, I think this is just looking at our labour and direct costs. So our inputs into these activities. So not total cost.
Okay.
Okay, so that is it.
Sorry. Councillor Nicol.
It was just a short comment to say that I personally, I get the intention with making these graphs, but I don't find them that useful knowing now the interconnection between all the bits and pieces. And I think it can send people in the wrong direction thinking that something is not getting invested in or getting too much invested in, and we get a lot of narrative back then. Is this included in the consultation docs?
Definitely doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I guess these are, subjective in terms of the, as you say, the interconnectedness between what we do and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So this is an assessment of primary contribution to those outcomes, but I think it's an indication of emphasis within our budgets, but not, I wouldn't wager any money on it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's good for us, but I don't know if it really helps public too much. So
no,
just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, just an observation. I see our customer spend is close to 20 million. Now I see an excellence, 15 million. So you add the two together, that's 35 million. I would have thought excellence should be focused on customers. It's our business, keeping them happy, as well as our regulatory issues, which I'm sure excellence measure over those. So you add those two together, that's a big part of our annual spend. Just wonder whether we've got the balance right.
Are you on page 20?
Page 20, yes, the graph. Look, I'm just commenting on the graph. I see those two going hand in hand rather than being separated, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think this is probably the point that Councillor Nichols raised in terms of the interdependency between these things. So one budget can actually be contributing to a number of outcomes. So yes, customer and excellence should work hand in glove. We are spending money in terms of our approach to customer service, which is around excellence.
So that then, my question is, are we happy that we've got the balance right? If you add those two together, is that right in terms of what our core business is, which is at the moment, water and community connections? It's running them a very close third. In fact, it's equal to our water spend. Is that right? Are we comfortable with that balance? I guess we'll come to that conclusion at some stage.
I suppose that's something to consider as we work through, particularly the business cases. Are we seeing that the business cases that are put before this council are addressing the priorities that we would like to see on behalf of our communities?
Thank you.
Okay, so now we start moving into the business cases. So slide and the next slide. Thanks, Dave. So in terms of the overall long-term plan and the focus for investment through this plan, what from a staff perspective we are suggesting is that regional and community resilience is effectively the theming or the focus for the long-term plan. We're dealing with complex and interrelated challenges exacerbated by cost pressures that have meant that we have had to focus in on those critical few issues. But in essence, everything that we are doing and the initiatives that are recommended to Council, the focus is around safeguarding resilience from an environmental perspective, but also economic, social and cultural. And so the diagram that's up there really just tries to represent, I guess, that central theme of regional and community resilience, supported by all of the business cases that you will now hear from directors and their staff on. So that is probably my time to exit stage left and leave you in the very capable hands of Tracy May to kick us off in the business cases.
All right, so just to sort of foreshadow based on some of that earlier conversation, this is where we are focusing on the business cases. So this is where we ask all the critical questions to ensure that we understand what each business case is going to deliver in exchange for the impact on rates. But we won't be making any, we won't pass motions one by one as we go through, because we recognize that all of this knits together somehow. So just signaling that to everybody. That's how we're going to work through these business cases. All right.
I have a quick question on the process. If we work through the business cases now, does that mean that the infrastructure strategy comes after the business cases and the transport like fares and special events all comes after? Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, the way the agenda is structured is to do the business cases up front because that's particular areas of change. those other topics will be covered off under the groups of activities, which
Right.
are sort of canvassing the matters outside of business cases. So the fares, regional rating for public transport, the infrastructure strategy will sit as part of that GOA
Thanks,
conversation.
that helps.
And just for clarity, so is there anything then in, let's say, the infrastructure strategy that would then that we might want to take into consideration when considering business cases that might impact on how we choose to invest in our infrastructure? I just don't want to get cart before the horse and all of that. So just trying to make sure we leave space
I would
there.
say probably the key one with the interfaces around the resilience business case. That is understanding some of those hazards and risks across the region, and how that informs how we manage infrastructure. The other one with a potential link is probably in the biosecurity, biodiversity, where we're talking about non-asset based solutions, which will
Mhm.
be planting,
Right.
you know, some nature-based solutions, which has probably got an interface in that biodiversity space in particular. Beyond that, I don't believe so.
Okay. Just flagging my expectation with ELT that as you take us through whatever business case
Yep.
sits in your area, that you will clearly highlight to us if there is any potential tension with anything that will be discussed after the business cases. All right. So that's my expectation, that it will be clearly flagged for counselors so that they're aware.
I appreciate you covering that, because the transport ones are like small detail-y things that can definitely be like alterations later, but the infrastructure strategy to me seemed like quite a different beast, which being a strategy you might discuss earlier on. So if it comes up earlier in the groups of activities and so forth, then I think it'll flow quite nice, but happy to just flow with how you've got it planned. Just don't want to leave it right until the end, because
No.
it doesn't make sense to talk strategy at the end of a whole lot of other conversation. Thanks.
Right. Are you exiting stage left?
And Madam Chair, I'll sit around here for the next 5 business cases.
Awesome.
So just to follow on from Janine in regard to the infrastructure strategy. So of the business cases you'll hear from, we'll do Healthy Waterways, Whangamarino, Waikare, Water Security Strategy, Biodiversity and Biosecurity with Greg, then the Coastal and Marine, then hopefully somebody else will talk for 5 minutes, and then review of critical infrastructure. So each of those all bump into the infrastructure strategy to some degree. Obviously, the review of funding for critical infrastructure quite significantly. And then there's a suite of others. Then I'll come back for the strategic spatial focus and sustainable peatlands, which again, both very much intersect with the infrastructure strategy in terms of future land use. So, Madam Chair, I'm up first for your sins. You have me. Healthy Waterways Freshwater Implementation, page 37 of your report and page 353 of your business cases. I will invite Ed and Bruce up as they were the authors and the facilitators of this, to answer any detailed questions you may have on the business case, noting that we have overviewed these twice with you, feeding back to the team the comments that you made in December. What I will do is just go through the first couple of slides in terms of the work that Bruce and I did last week in terms of the implications of the MPS review. Dave, I'll just let you click to the next slide for us, please, to see what it is. Importantly, councillors, this is a continuation of what was the anchor tenant in the previous business case. I think importantly, just following on from the words that Janine spoke before around resilience. It's not only environmental resilience, it's our community resilience and our ongoing economic resilience of our region. Water underpins all of that for all of us in the region. I always think back to Jim Milne, for those who know Jim, who stood up in the opening of our Plan Change 1 hearings. I understand he did the same in Variation 6, where he said water is life. And for us, it is one of our core responsibilities. The business case on page 353 that these wonderful gentlemen and their team put together does include monitoring science, policy development, our primary industry engagement, and regional freshwater consent. So, Councillor Nicol, your question you asked previously, maybe one where this is an opening where Brent can respond to that. There is a reduction in direct costs. That is primarily, when we say the direct cost, that's a reduction from our baseline, which was the 23-24 budget. And that was a significant budget for investment in contracted services in our freshwater policy review. Dave, if we can go to the next slide. That is the financials. You've got that on page 31. And then the next slide, Dave, is, I guess, what I'd like to talk about. So this is the work that Bruce and I did last week in terms of the budget and what does it look like, how different is it. As I mentioned, the Repeal Act came in last year. It is that opportunity to refresh the project. We have a new target in line that we'd like to take you through some of the detailed workings that we've been doing on that for a workshop scheduled on the 8th of February. We've got 2 topics on that day. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, through Blair Keenan, made contact and would like to workshop with Council some work that he has been doing. And then we'll also just like to talk to you about freshwater. Dave, if you can just go to the next slide, just so councillors, you can get a feel for what we're talking about. So the blue line is the existing LTP that you have in front of you, the budget that you have in front of you for the freshwater policy program. The line that shifted a little bit to the right, and that is brown for anybody who may be colourblind, is the recast budget that Bruce and I have spent some time on. It is moving things out by 18 months. It is also over the life of the LTP, a reduction of $990,000 for the program. And that's having a look at it. Again, I will go back to what Councillor Hughes eloquently shared with us. You know, this is the next 3 years, we can make a very good guess. The 3 years after that at this stage is pretty opaque. And the final 3 years in terms of a 10-year plan gets far more cloudy. So this is where we've landed. This is only the freshwater policy program of the wider matters that have been covered. Ed or Bruce, is there anything you'd like to say that I haven't covered? We'll respond to questions.
Okay, so the blue is what is before us.
Correct.
The brown.
If we go back to the previous slide, Dave, is those figures. So in that table, light grey at the top is the LTP budget that is within the Healthy Waterways business case for freshwater policy. The kind of looks violet almost, is the edit that Bruce and I did last week. The numbers at the bottom are the change. So we believe year 1 there'll be 400,000 savings, 428 the following year, 1.2 the following year.
Okay, so if I'm looking on page 37 of our agenda and I've got that the financials down the bottom, you're saying that those are no longer what you're proposing, this is what you're proposing.
This is in addition to what's in here. Remember, on page 37, that is the total of the Healthy Waterways business case.
Yeah.
Freshwater policy is one line
One
of the
portion
Healthy
of it.
Waterways business case. What we're saying is within that business case for the next 3 years, there will be a reduction in spend, but the 3 years following that, because we have moved everything out 18 months, there will be an increase. So this speaks to what Janine was talking about earlier in terms of some of those dips.
Sure. I just want councillors to be clear, we're all collectively operating off of the material that's been put forward to us in these homes.
Yes.
Just want to make sure if anything has changed, that we're very clear with councillors where.
Yeah, can I just check, Tracy? So what you're saying is for the policy program part of the freshwater business case is that councillor, that you've had another look at the program in light of the new information, and that you're suggesting that next year another $400,000 can come off the rating requirement,
Correct.
which means that the current 6.8%, whatever it is in there, will come down a little bit. Janine, yeah, I've got nods going over there. Tracy, that's what you're suggesting. So you're updating the information that was sent out, saying that there's a reduction in years.
There's a
1 and 2,
reduction in
and-
years 1, 2, and 3, but an increase in years 4, 5, and 6.
All right, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yes, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
All right, I've got Councillor Dunbar-Smith, Councillor Kneebone, and Councillor Hughes. Ben.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the full agenda, page 356, is the 2021 LTP or figures, which we're looking at 1.9 million. So we can ignore all that for now because that's all shifted. That's all moved with your graphs. So a lot of the business case that's sitting there with 4.5 water quality monitoring staff in
So-
this year is not happening now. It's shifting a year or two.
So the agenda page 356 was telling you what was in the previous LTP.
Yep.
So that is not now. The figures that are included within the business case, which I think are now on page 357. Right.
I think it's 361.
Right, yep. 361, thank you, Councillor Dunbar-Smith. These are now corrected with the figures down the bottom there. They will be reduced over the next 3 years.
Yeah, so that's on page 37. So where it was showing saving of 277,000, it's now showing 400,000. Is that right in the first year?
I think it'll show 677,000.
200.
It's in addition.
400. Okay, so in this current year, 24-25, the activity that's still proposed is going to be notification of freshwater policy instruments, summarising of submissions, engagement of freshwater commissioners, and preparing section 42 report on submissions. So
Dave, could you go to the next slide, please? So what all of that gets effectively lifted and shifted by 18 months.
okay, so this information we've got on our agenda is incorrect.
Correct. Yes, it is out of date because Bruce and I could only meet last week because of holidays and all other things. You needed it in front of you, so we asked Janine if we could bring it to you today, updated.
Okay, that's good, because I wondered why we were appointing freshwater commissioners if the legislation's altering and
No, that's a very good question. So we didn't get time to update the narrative, but that's why we've taken the time to show it like this, and we will update that for you. As I indicated, we will have a workshop on the 8th of February, which will have the refreshed timeline.
Councillor Kneebone.
Couple of questions, Tracy, and Co. One is, we always knew we were being pushed to do too much, too broadly, too quickly in terms of our Waikato, Waipa, Waiho, Hauraki, Coromandel, and the West Coast. Are we missing an opportunity here by pushing this out a wee bit in terms of that if we kept the resource there, we could potentially put a bit more focus back into the Waiho Kapō because we know that it's, despite the best intentions, it's still going to be pretty tough going getting all this rolled out. And I guess sort of somewhat related, but is the whole issue around implementation of PC1 that hasn't been mentioned in this process that I can see, not with emphasis anyway, and we've already lost a whole bunch of time with PC1 because of the project, which is putting us even further behind, giving a 35 months.
So these are all matters that Bruce and I have been grappling with. We have a 10-year bit of a table that has all the matters you've raised, that has local government and central government elections in, because they tend to fiddle around with things as well. We have also a review of Te Ture Whaimana that we can't be inconsistent with. So would you notify a plan in advance of something coming out? Do you put something out interim in terms of Waiho Piako, looking at the settlement deed for the Waiho Piako Coromandel catchment plan and how that knits together, when in essence at the moment it is a replication of what the MPS requires. So we have put all that in the mix. We've also been very cognizant of comments Councillor Cookson made last year around the more we don't do something, does that mean more is happening in the Waiho Piako Hauraki area than not? And we believe the NES provides a good backstop essentially there as it's crafted at the moment. There is probably, last count, I'd say 57 things we're taking into account of here, least of all our continuing engagement with people who want to engage with us and get it right, our existing statutory requirements to fulfil our planning responsibilities, of which we've already had some correspondence from the Environmental Defence Society, who reminded us of our statutory responsibilities, which was helpful, to prepare a plan without undue haste. So we are putting all that together, and that's what we want to bring you on the 8th of February and not take up, I guess, too much time as part of the LTP, but give you some comfort that we are thinking about it. In regard to Plan Change 1, I think, Bruce, our last intelligence is best case we can anticipate a decision mid-year, worst case December.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And that may or may not go further through the Court of Appeal. But Brent, you might just like to talk about PC1 implementation.
Bruce, can I get you to, there you go.
Oh, here we go. Morning, Councillor. Yeah, so we are planning on implementation based on the court making a decision in the middle of the year. So in the business case, you'll see compliance resources starting to ramp. So PA compliance, because there's a lot of new PA rules that are coming through for PC1. So PA compliance officers ramping up incrementally over the next 3 years, and equally starting in year 2, because it'll take a year or so for the consents to come through, consent compliance ramping up as well over the next 4 years. So you'll see 6 new roles over the next 4 years in the regulatory side of implementation of PC1. And you'll also have seen that we have refreshed how the primary industry engagement team is, I guess, has been established to both support the delivery of PC1 at the same time as supporting the delivery of the National Farm Planning Regulation. So that was a long answer to the short question of, are we looking at implementation? Absolutely.
Stu, you good?
Sort of for now, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Right, I'll get you light. There we go. I've got Councillor Hughes, Councillor Graff, and Councillor Cookson. Councillor Hughes. Robbie, can I get you to?
Sorry. Thanks, Madam Chair. Really just a couple of points. First, follow up from a question from Councillor Dunbar-Smith that the suggestion here about the engagement of freshwater commissioners has been canned. That's not happening. And the second point is that I want confirmation that we are no longer investing any money in the current freshwater policy program documents apart from PC1 requirements that compliance purposes to make sure that we've got PC1 covered. But because my understanding is the existing legislation policy statement will be replaced and it's more likely to be devolved back to the region than be done centrally. I just want confirmation that we're not investing any further time and money in the current program.
Madam Chair, the first response, so the engagement of commissioners, and it's not canned, it's deferred, but it will not occur within the 3 years of this LTP. So the present legislation that we are planning for still has the freshwater commissioners as the decision-making entity on freshwater plans. So we have provisioned for that, but we've shifted it 18 months. It will not be within, our plan will not go to freshwater commissioners within the first 3 years of our 10 years of the LTP. The next LTP will look at that closely. So is that
So
clear?
we're providing for the current legislation with the current timeframes
Correct.
in this, in what's proposed.
Yes, which does not mean that we will be having a plan that will be going to freshwater commissioners within our 3 years.
But
It will- it
until
will be
such time
year
that
4.
legislation changes, we do need to consider, or
Correct.
we do need to plan for
Yep.
compliance with that.
Yeah, if I can get on to the second part of the question, I cannot give assurance that there will be no further spend. It'll be my recommendation bringing to the council workshop on the 8th of Feb that we will continue with the policy review based on, I guess, the comments that I'd previously shared with council last year. It wouldn't be prudent of us to halt completely, but what we will be bringing back to you is something that the team believe is a better recast, will enable us to have better conversations with the sectors impacted and actually result in a lot better policy than what we were potentially cramming in as a compliance with legislation exercise. So it'll enable better engagement with our sectors, with our iwi partners and with our community, but gives us more time to do more thinking, also with ourselves internally within WRC. So my recommendation to you bringing to you for discussion on February the 8th workshop will be a continuation of the freshwater policy program, but recast and less than what we were previously going to do in the next 12 months.
If I could just make some comments and correct me where I'm wrong, Tracy. So the government has not put out a stop work notice
No.
on freshwater plans around the country. What they have done is indicated they're going to have they're going to look at the RMA, and that's over they're going to follow due legislative process, and that will be over a 2-year period or whatever. And
Yep.
within that, they are also going to have a look at the NPS for freshwater, which I said they will follow due process and they're not shortcutting anything, which will take 18 months, 2 years or so on. I was at a meeting last week with executives from primary industries and primary industry organisations, and with other regional council chief executives. There's a whole range of different approaches to what councils are doing. Many councils are continuing with their freshwater plans on the basis that they need to do it, not just because of national direction, but they have water quality issues and other things that they need to be working on. There's some councils who are already notified or have drafts out there. There's, I know, Otago, they have a specific deadline given by the minister in mid this year, but most councils are continuing to progress. Maybe just some are planning to slip that December 2024 timeline, I just sort of give you a view of what's happening around the traps. My understanding that is that there hasn't been a stop doing work notice given to councils at this stage.
No, that's correct, Chris. What we have heard is that there are 3 tranches to the RMA reform. The first tranche was to repeal the 2 previous acts, so government has done that. The next tranche that we know we'll probably see in the not too distant future is a fast track consenting process as part of RMA amendments. So we're envisaging that in the next 2 to 3 months. Following that, there will be the review of the MPS will begin, and then following that, there will be replacing the RMA with new law. Now that is quite substantial pieces of work. The refresh of the national policy statement, it was what was in the coalition agreements, and the words are escaping me now, but it was to review the MPS freshwater management with a view to looking at the hierarchy of Te Mana o Te Wai. Now, before Christmas, I mentioned to councils, if the government goes back to 2017, which seems to be the policy baseline for a lot of the decisions when the last national government was in, there was a very comprehensive MPS freshwater management dealing with water quality, water quantity, Te Mana o Te Wai, wetlands, outstanding water bodies. So it will be deep and it will be complex. What we're wanting to do is carry on developing a policy that will sit there, that we will not notify until we have a new MPS that might show some significant shifts. But in the meantime, our recommendation to you will be to carry on and do the work. As I keep saying to councillors, I said all through when the MBA and the Spatial Planning Act was coming in, this is our life in resource management policy. We are constantly working with changed direction. We have a state of the environment report. We know after 20 years of science we have some issues. We need some interventions. What I think the opportunity is here that the government's given us is a really good opportunity to sit down with those sectors impacted and hopefully come up with better solutions than what we would have had in a compressed timeline.
Thanks for that, Tracy. All right, I've got Councillor Graff, Cookson, Nicol, Clarkson, Smith, and Strange. Just letting you know the lineup. Councillor Graff. Pass. Nice. Nice. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a discussion that me and myself and Noel and a couple of landowners who were having still the other day, where the problem of this is council's got to take a different lens of its way it does business. And if you don't seriously start considering this, there will be revolt from the landowners out there that they will not accept the way that you want to keep interpreting the rules of this organisation. And it's up to you if you don't want to listen to that. That's your right not to, but it's about time I think you do, because there's the voices out there are growing to say this is enough. You take the letter of the law to the maximum instead of taking it to the middle. That is in a fair place that everyone can be fairly treated within the rules. So I say, Tracy, you start listening to that very clearly, because that loud noise is going to keep coming in louder, harder, faster, and it's not going to stop unless you want to start taking some real notice of it. Thank you.
I look forward to the workshop on the 8th where we can go into this in greater detail. All right, I've got Councillor Clarkson. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Councillor Nicol. Councillor Nicol. Then
I'll keep it brief, but thanks Tracy and Chris for that explanation and honest answers to how we're approaching it. And thanks to Brent, appreciate the FTE, noting though it's very much in the permitted activity and water space. Please don't take your eye off the other spaces that might need improvement in the future. So, and looking again more beyond just the highest risk pieces, I think there's more to grow there. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually support the general approach that Tracy has outlined, because it's not just about review and repeal of what central government says, it's about our regional responsibilities. And we have a regional plan already that we should be following, and we already have a state of the environment report which gave us a whole lot of clues about what we need to do. And I think that's the key point, is the problem doesn't go away when you review and repeal legislation. The outcome we're seeking, which is around water quality and other aspects of water, doesn't go away when you do that. And so the question, I mean, the approach that's been outlined to us today is us focusing ourselves on getting the right answer for our region. And I think there's a huge merit in that approach. I also wanted to note that, for example, on page 361, where there's some detail provided around monitoring and data management, there's a recent paper just come out, authored by Richie McDowell and David Hamilton and various other people, and I'm sure the staff here in the council have spotted it, but it actually delves into some detail on why our monitoring networks are not up for the current job even. And I'm assuming they've been looking at that and thinking, how are we going to improve what we're doing regionally to make sure that we're getting all of the right answers that we need to make our decisions. So yes, I just wanted to make that general comment in support of the approach that Tracy's just outlined.
Thanks for that. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Bruce has probably taken some of the words from me, but I support what he's been saying. The issue for me is we need to do the work. But I also think Robbie's made an excellent point in the work that we've been doing in the last, well, since council broke up before Christmas. Robbie and I have been out in the field, and I acknowledge, Chris, you're attending some of the landowner meetings and other staff. The way in which the engagement is, we've got to go to the people, and rather than expecting them to come to us, it's been very fruitful. And I think the thoughts and comments that Robbie's articulated encapsulates what those landowners are saying. You know, please listen. We do have things of value to say, and it's not until you push some people that they come out swinging. And I think we've seen a little bit of that. So, if next or the 8th is where we do all this, that's fine. I think if we take our time to do it right, which means I'm a little concerned about pushing things further out, because I'd rather see, rather than a peak there, a more plateaued approach over a longer time, as opposed to a peaking at, in 2 years' time or whatever. We need to get there sooner and perform at a higher level of engagement, and rather than up and down, it puts so much pressure. So I just wonder whether that, I think the intent's right, but whether the delivery on that graph is the true picture that we should be trying to emulate. So anyway, let's see what the discussion brings on. But we shouldn't stop spending, although we don't need to spend as much. Yeah, but let's do it longer, slower.
So do I understand the peak correctly in that the peak happens when we would be at a position where we are preparing the what is it, section 42 report and the commissioners and all of that kind of thing? Where that initial lead-in and slightly upward trajectory of the brown line is still asking for investments to do just as you say, Councillor Smith, ensure that we continue to make progress? Yeah?
Correct, Madam Chair. This isn't a graph of effort. This is a graph of direct costs. So the direct costs, the peak, come when the Freshwater Commission sits, because it is, whilst we don't get to appoint the commission at the moment in law, it is appointed through the head environment court judge, the commissioners, but we get to pay for it. And all of the experts that they may call to assist them to make their decision. And that's what the peak is in terms of the effort. And Bruce's team that will be going, and Ed's team, Mike's teams, and the teams across the organisation that graph will look quite different. So it isn't quite as peaky as you say, Councillor Smith.
And that's probably the issue, is that that's a graph that is only about money.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
not about the effort. And I
Yeah.
think that's my concern, is that we don't, while we might ease off some of the pressure, it needs to be maintained and spread out.
And hopefully we will have that information hopefully in a more digestible form on the 8th for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with some of the points that have been raised so far. I do take exception to people talking to staff disrespectfully. And I don't think our staff are here to be talked to in a raised voice. So just wondering if that councillor could maybe think about tone and voice.
Yeah, noted.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tracy, the 260 odd thousand saving and direct cost saving, how was that achieved? It's out from 1.6 down to 1.
So that initial 277 was a saving from baseline. So we used the annual plan 23-24 as baseline in terms of the work, and it's predominantly in, whilst freshwater policy program seems to be hogging the limelight, it is the main saving in year 1 and 2. So we've got a baseline from our 23-24 annual plan. That has been this year where we have invested a lot in consultants, in legal fees to help understand and puddle our way through things, to also commission quite a bit of work. Because we've done that over the last 18 months and more latterly the last 6 months of this year, we will not need that level of investment going forward. Because we have that foundation.
Thank you. And I just wanted to reconfirm with you that, and going back to Chris's point, that we aren't engaging with freshwater commissioners at all.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. It's kind of clear as custard.
Yeah.
Not in year 1, 2 or 3 of this LTP. We will, because that's what the legislation presently says. So that's what we're presently budgeting for. We're indicating that in year, where are we? Year 5. So that will be in the next LTP.
Okay. Thank you.
At this stage. It may change, it may look different, but what we are indicating is somebody will need to hear and make decisions, whether it's freshwater commissions or a committee of this council, that'll be in the next LTP.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith and then Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, I've just got a question of procedure. So if we've got this meeting on the 8th of February, what happens today, and does that, does the LTP get delayed until the 8th of February? What's the procedure for moving forward on those decisions? Because this information is not accurate.
Yeah. Just can we get some guidance on that?
So, Madam Chair, I had anticipated it was a workshop on the 8th of February to let councillors know the recasting of the project that we are doing. This is the budgeting for that. If council were to make any, well, you can't make any decisions on the 8th because it's a workshop. If council were of a mind to take something to a council meeting for decision, then that, if it doesn't coalesce with the LTP, then that would come through in the CE submission to the LTP.
Okay, so is that clear? Yeah.
So,
I was just going to say, Janine might want to comment, but I'd be suggesting that we're making decisions today about what's in budgets, and we'll then get built into the consultation document that will go out. And as Tracy just said, if there needs to be a departure from that, that would possibly come through a CE submission later on.
But what councillors are being asked to consider is the brown graph.
Correct.
It is no longer the data that is in this agenda. It is what you are putting forward in front of us now.
Dave, if you can flick to the
Other than
previous slide.
it is just, it's
And
the
I
same
do
stuff, it's just shifted.
Yeah, look, I do apologise for this, just things didn't get in the slipstream.
Yeah.
So rather than wait for the CE submission, we wanted
You're
to bring
signaling it
today.
now.
So those highlighted line, the bold lines down the bottom will be additional savings for year 1, 2 and 3 of the LTP, additional to what's on page 37. There will be
The
increases in
400, the 428 are savings,
savings. The 1.2 in year 3.
even though they're a positive number.
Yes, because
Not-
I thought I'd show them as a positive because I thought it was a good
It's a
story.
good news story.
And I'm not an accountant.
I like it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the effort. Yeah.
But years 4, 5 and 6 is where things get shifted
Right.
with the playing field that we're operating
Yep.
on now.
Okay. So are we all clear what we're making a decision on? Wait a minute, I don't have a red light for you. Bruce, can we turn that second one off? There we go. Yeah.
Sorry, I understand that what we've got here in front of us today is what goes out for consultation.
What, sorry, to help you, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, I forwarded these to Janine on Friday. What perhaps we can do is give you an updated page 37 that will form part of your deliberation. So you're very clear what it is this business case is seeking.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that because this meeting is going to extend for several days, so you can bring us back something. But otherwise, it's suggesting here that in the 2024-25 year, we're going to be engaging freshwater commissioners, which is not what you're saying we're doing.
No, we will refresh the narrative as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so we will get, before decisions are made, we'll get an updated page 37, but also will there be updates to the earlier
Yes,
overall financial?
we need to,
Yes.
a supplementary paper.
Yeah, yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, what I anticipate being able to put in front of council at the end of your discussions is a schedule of all of the changes that have been made from what is included in your agenda pack, so that we can be really clear where we started from, where we're ending, and all of those matters that have been determined. So that will pick up this change that Tracy's highlighted now. So it will show you exactly what calls have been made.
And for absolute clarity, Madam Chair, and those changes that we are seeing today, such as that graph with 2 before and after, the after and all those other changes, we make the decision on, and that's the basis of the consultation document.
That
Not-
is correct, and
Yes.
that is why the numbers in terms of the final resolutions for council on the setting of the budget are all TBC. So
That's
they will be inclusive of
Yeah.
all of the decisions that you make this week.
No,
Right.
but that's what I believe to be the case, but just wanted to make sure
All right.
everyone's on the same page. Thank you.
Councillor Kneebaum.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to make a couple of comments, just, and I guess to endorse in particular the comments that Bruce made and Chris as well, and that the reason the previous government put in place these national directives was because regional councils, in the general sense, were seen by the public as not being active enough with freshwater management. And I don't know that I did, but if I heard Noel and Robbie's, the guts of their criticisms against the council, I made against the council, not against Tracy, was that we weren't engaging with farmers in the way that they think we should. One of the real downsides of the most recent directive from the government was the pace at which they wanted us to do things, which forced us to to do nowhere near as much consultation with them as what we were
As
able
we
to
would
do
like
through
to.
PC1.
Yes.
So my issue is that rather than push things out a bit further, I think we should take this opportunity to have better engagement than
meaningful
what we were
conversations.
going to be able to do, you know. I'll just leave it there, but that's my concern with pushing things out, eh?
I think, I don't believe Robbie was trying to be critical of a particular staff member, nor was I when I endorsed what he said, because they were comments that came back. And maybe the chief executive who experienced some of the comments from the landowners may wish to comment, but the reality is, my concern is that there's more than one way to skin a cat and there's more than one way to consult. We've heard from particular landowners, and they're by far the minority of the people in this region. However, they've got a huge and highly a huge investment in land drainage and river and flood protection and so on. They have given some comments which both Robbie and I have taken on board, and I believe that it's fair to raise those comments in the safety of the council chamber. And no one is trying to personalise this against any particular staff member. They are genuinely held concerns by some of our ratepayers, and they've been raised. Now, it's over to us how we deal with that going forward, but it's only fair in the safe environment that they be raised. And I don't think some councillors need to be precious about that. And if there was any offence taken, there was certainly none intended from me. So
We're just, I think that, I think it is fantastic that we are raising these types of issues. I think that what we need to note is the manner in which we do that. And that as we work through this, we have a number of days ahead of us and there's a lot of material. We just need to be mindful of the tone that we use, but we are all welcome to share the concerns or the comments that we all hear from our constituents, as long as we're constructive and respectful in doing that. All right. I've got Councillor Downard.
That long, Tracy answered my question.
Okay. Councillor Cookson.
I'm sorry.
Noting what I've said so that we can move
I'm
on.
just going to. I'm sorry if I offended anybody. I was not intending to do that at all. But these landowners and Noel have had letters from MB explaining how this law should be interpreted, and we do not interpret it the way that they expected it to be. So that's where the confusion is coming in, and that's why I asked that our council needs to start looking at things in a different lens. And I don't think that's being rude. That's just saying, hey, we might be looking at it here, but really the best place we should be looking at is here. And that's all I'm asking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anything else on? Yes.
Madam Chair, I don't wish to labour the point, but we've only kind of talked about the freshwater policy review.
Oh, gosh. What, there's more?
The rest of the Healthy Waterways business case, as we said, it does deal with science, with our monitoring. We are looking at an increased investment in those areas. I wasn't sure whether Brent wanted to talk any further about primary industry engagement and the work we're doing in that space. I just know that our wild child of the freshwater policy review tends to get all the airplay when there is so much more to this business case than that. Brent, is there anything you'd like to specifically identify?
Thanks, Tracy. I'll keep this brief, and just a repeat really, or a reminder of the conversations that we had at the workshop. The original business case, the 2021 business case that was developed at a time that was before national instruments. And so you'll see the work program around delivering the PC1 and the national instruments has been spread over a longer period of time. And you'll see in the document what it means is that there's a reduction in spend in year one from baseline, but it's a spread over a longer period of time as we're phasing that work in. As you'd have seen, there's quite significant consenting workload that is anticipated through PC1, where we'll be looking to have the very vast majority of that contracted out. It's Because it's a hump of work, you don't resource for a hump. And so much of that hump will be dealt with through contracting out. And as I mentioned earlier, we have progressively ramping up resource around the compliance side, one PA in year one, a consenting compliance, and a PA in year two. So it's just ramping up because we anticipate whenever any new legislation, including PC1, comes along, a lot of the initial work is about working with and informing parties. And so that's a lot of the work that our primary industry engagement team is being set up to do. So that's a summary of the implementation in the health river space.
Thank you, Brent. Madam Chair, I've just asked Ed to make a couple of comments because monitoring is something that we grappled with in this business case and just our investment in that through its many iterations. Ed.
Thank you. So the paper is up to date on the comments I am putting forward, but just the key points. So we have found 130k saving in the existing budgets and working forwards. We are recommending a pause on the future monitoring that was in the original business case. So that was for dissolved oxygen in particular, that had a capex purchase of 325k plus 2 FTE. It's not that dissolved oxygen isn't an issue for the region. It was more how it was being prescribed with the focus of low discharges, where we view it's more in lowland rivers and we would do it a different way. So we're proposing a delay from 2024 to 2026 to see post the review of the MPSFM. Similar for the increase in monitoring that we were going to do for the 22 compulsory attributes, which had an associated laboratory cost of 100k and 3 staff. A particular aspect of that was the periphyton monitoring, and this is quite a labour-intensive monitoring, and it's not viewed by the scientists as a key issue for our region. We are working through a previous business case on emerging technologies to see if there's a technology approach we can use for that. So we're hoping that would actually, even when we do implement it, have a much lower labour cost. And the same with deferring the cyanobacteria monitoring. Again, it is an issue for the region, but we already have monitoring in place. We're also going to a much greater use of LAWA in education, and we now have field equipment that enables us not always having to send a sample to the lab, which is around $300 a sample. So we're able to get an indication in the field. A recommendation I've put forward is retaining the fish passage monitoring at around 50k per annum. And that's because this is an issue even without the NPSFM. And it is around doing that baseline monitoring with students so that then we can make the decisions to know which structures should be modified and to modify them correctly, and taking into account previous conversations at a prior workshop that not all structures are an issue because they may be stopping pest fish, but this would be doing the auditing work and to get us that right information. Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Oh, I just wanted to say that this process is somewhat confusing when you're looking at the business case, the detailed business case, and then looking at page 37. Page 37, this primarily just talks about the policy on healthy waterways, whereas there is quite a bit of information about the farm engagement and the stuff Ed's just been talking about. Whether some of that could be referenced, I'm assuming that the average person reading this will just read the page 37 summary, not the rest. And so it's just a suggestion.
Okay, so this was an agenda that's put together for councillors. And I know average people do read the council agenda, bless them. This isn't your engagement document, just to be clear. Yep.
Yes.
Ed, I just want to make sure it's clear for everybody. So the changes you've just referred to are already built into the budget. It's not like the change that Tracy signalled for the policy program. So that's not signalling any additional savings. That's already in the
They are already
baseline.
in the business case as presented to you in this information.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that because I was not clear on that. So cheers. Appreciate that. All right. Yes,
Yeah,
Councillor Martin.
and along the lines that Chris just raised, just with the final comments around the repealing of the NBEA and the chance to actually recoup some costs for monitoring in that process. Is that going to adjust any figures?
So
yeah, I'll grab that one, Tracy. Yeah, unfortunately, councillor, that's the case. We had included in the budget in anticipation to be able to recover some of our monitoring costs. That opportunity has now gone with the MBA. Yeah. So those costs will. So no, I don't think so, Jenny. I think it's in the permitted activity monitoring rate was going to be able to be, if you like, offset to a degree by some compliance recovery costs through the MBA, but that opportunity is now lost.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Moore, were you referring to compliance monitoring costs, or were you talking about environmental monitoring costs?
Oh, the environmental.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that might have been the case. I think that there's a bit of discussion at the moment. I was in a discussion last week about what types of attributes could perhaps change that we might be able to signal to ministers, and I think a couple that that Ed had just raised, the likes of periphyton monitoring in the Waikato, we didn't feel that we don't have those types of rivers and streams that are down the South Island. Is that what you were referring to, Ed?
Correct, yes, that's the type of monitoring we're reducing, taking up.
All right. So any further questions on this particular business case? Again, we're not going to make any decisions until we make our way through all of these. Nope. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. What's next there, Tracy?
So next we go to Whangamarino Waikare, options and actions. So that's on page 38 and page 365. My trustee assistant on this one is in the South Island, Mike. So I think, councillors, this is fairly self-explanatory. Dave, if you can tootle us through the... Here we go. So we've taken you through this business case before. When you looked at this in December, you did ask that we rename it Whangamarino and Waikare to give an indication of it's not just focused on Whangamarino. That the business case, the detailed business case, which is on page 365 of the attachment, had enough funding to do the work. The comment was made around there is no provision in the outer years for anything that may come out of this. Now, that was a comment that was made in December. Again, it's very difficult to quantify how long a piece of string is when I think a lot of the work in the infrastructure strategy and some of our catchment modelling, our catchment spatial plans may be part of this. Also, this is tangled up a little bit in Plan Change 1. And I guess the other comment that councillors made was recognition in the business case that there will be other agencies who want to partner with us. And so that may give us additional funding. And also that last comment that was made in December has been incorporated in the business case, which is around, engaging somebody independent to undertake this work so that some of our own council assumptions can be tested. And so that, what are those three rules? I'm from the council, I'm here to help. People don't always necessarily respond to that. I'm here doing some work for the council. Please, I'd like to have a conversation with you, might get a better response. So, Madam Chair, this one is very much self-explanatory, investment long overdue. As Janine indicated previously, this is one of the business cases that we are looking to seek funding from the prior year's surplus.
Councillor Smith.
This issue's been talked about for so long, but nothing seems to have been done. I think it was Bruce who talked about this at the workshop. It's time that we actually identified what the issue is, what are the options, and then that's the next step. So I understand why we're not funding the next step, because we don't know what that is. And so we need to draw a line in the sand, identify what we have got, what we can do about it, and move on. So when this comes, I'll support this, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
Madam Chair, just the last comment, we have been purposeful that any outputs of this, and with all the business cases, we have tied them to performance measures, to LTP performance measures. So we'll go through those when we get on to our groups of activities. But we have tied this to 2 years so that it can inform the next LTP.
Right. Right. Councillor Kneebone and then Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Kneebone.
I guess my question is, Tracy, could we not be a bit more aspirational here? And I just noted in the those blue, green and red boxes, you talked about one of the risks is that if we go to aspirational, we might not bring critical stakeholders along with us. And I suppose just on the back of Noel's comments, we could, and I'm trying to be a scientist, but we know that one of the fundamental problems here is that it's all part of the implemented flood protection scheme, and I just, in all reality, can't see that ever changing. But I suspect there are lots of smaller things we could do off to the side that would really help. And I just wonder whether we shouldn't try and get some of those projects underway in the same time as we do this. But and I mean, for a start, it's just a massive blasted willow trees for a beginning, you know, and we just critically ignore it and say it's a great Ramsar site, but it looks pretty unappealing to the punter. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, look, I get what you're saying, and of course we're two minds of this, because you can carry on nibbling around the edges and putting money in, and actually if you use that money to make significant investments, this isn't stopping any work ongoing now. This is in addition to the work that we're doing. What I would anticipate that will come out of something like this, and you know, we haven't even scoped it up yet, and that's something that we will do and bring back to council, is what are the quick wins and what are the ones that are more complex. I would suggest a lot of the quick wins we're doing now because they're easy, or easier, but what are the more complex? So much like some of the work we've done, if we look at Te Ture Whaimana, the Waikato Waipa restoration strategy, there's a weighting given to, you know, some of the less complex things we can do more immediate, and then some that will take a bit more conversation. So I don't think this impedes anything we're doing at the moment, but I do understand what you're saying. You know, do we need to take 2 years to go and do some work on the willows?
Yeah, no, look, I acknowledge the policy part of it, but I just wonder whether the ICM side of things, we shouldn't be looking for opportunities, because I know the River Authority would be only too keen to jump in and help as well, you know, so anyway.
That's something that we can have a conversation with Sarah about.
Yeah.
Just along those lines of more aspirational, what would, if you wanted this piece of work to be more aspirational, what would that look like?
For me, $400,000 to engage consultants to do the work we're looking at is fairly aspirational anyway.
Okay.
More aspirational would be a wider scope of work that probably would look to invest in some of the implementation. I think that might be
hard to preempt what that might look like.
I think it might be a bridge too far at this point.
Okay, I've got Councillor Clarkson and then Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, flesh out a little bit about what might lead it to being aspirational and what consultation process could occur even now in relation to an LTP to actually get some of the key partners lined up in a way that the bottom line here is that the cost of achieving this result is going to be, no, I wouldn't even like to make a prediction. It might have a B in it rather than an M. And so the point is that, again, we did get a comment earlier from Councillor Mahuta, who sort of indicated some stuff that needs to go on to get people lined up in advance, not wait before we release an LTP even. So I'm just asking that question really, Because yes, this has to be done, but to get the result we need is going to be a big deal. And of course, actually now the new Minister of Conservation is a local.
Mm.
And I'm always concerned about where is DOC in this picture and how can we get them on side really early. Yeah, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, perhaps is this a consultation topic or something we can put on the board?
Yeah, is there something that, can we ask our community, is this something that is truly important to you? And if so, what does us addressing it, what might that look like for individuals, I
Maybe,
suppose? Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
We did this for Lake Taupo.
Mm.
Now, a Ramsar site surely is somewhere in the same league, right?
Well, a number of constituents that I have talked to over the last few years have raised this as an area that they would like to see focus on. So, so something to note, how we might include a conversation with our communities around these significant sites.
Through you, Madam Chair, there are a lot of people who are talking to us about this. They're not wanting to put their head above the parapet yet. Some are ministries, and they are wanting to see what, again, we come back to that power of the regional council as the power to convene. So they are waiting for a signal from us, and then I think they will jump on our coattails.
Councillor Nicol, then Councillor Mahuta.
I think Councillor Mahuta might flow nicer. I'm happy to go after.
Sure. Councillor Mahuta.
Oh, no, just in support of Bruce's thing. I think the whole term I've been a councillor, it has been the government stakeholders that have been slower to partner, but we wasted a whole lot of money on legal advice that didn't help the lake. And that was behaviour driven by conservation. We had to protect our position and others. So if we're going to do it different, then we need a bigger purpose like the Lake Taupo one for Waikare Whangamarino. And I'd say the biggest affected stakeholder is transport. Both the rail and the road need that lake and wetland managed. They've never really been in the same conversation with us about restoration.
Very good point.
But if we don't do our job, then they don't have a railway or a road. So somehow, just for new council, we need to drive everybody into a room and to a space where they want to work with us. I just wanted to support Councillor Clarkson, so thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Nicol.
So with this business case, the discomfort I have is that I've seen sums of money like that before go into something to have a consultant to work towards an action plan. And I think, to think of an example, the Koi Carp one. And I have, as a councillor, haven't seen much come from that, but that's because I'm not in that space. But where I would have liked to have this business case go, because I consider option 3 as kind of a bare minimum after what's the attention's been on it and just the right thing to do. I see a jump from option 3 to option 4 as being a really big number, and I don't quite know what the difference is between them. And then the framing is very much about pushing faster, which is more of a how rather than a what. So I'm struggling to figure out, how to go a bit more above option 3, but not quite ending up with what was described in option 4. So a few points I wanted to make was really interesting discussion in the background around Kapuatai and Miranda as well, being Ramsar sites, being areas that also need some work. I would propose also that when we're trying to go into a relationship with others to say, let's all commit to this, if we only budget for 2 years, it doesn't show a lot of commitment long term. And so if there are other catchment action plans coming up in future, such as for those other Ramsar sites, why don't we look at a permanent staff member or a longer fixed term than 2 years or something where we get to have staff member kind of quality and retention of knowledge and everything else, relationship building, rather than a consultant. Sorry, am I assuming that was a consultant? Okay, thank you. And signalling in the future that either there is money available for following through on what we agree with people, or there's money available for the catchment action management plans for these other sites from the learnings. And it kind of spreads that out a bit more over that 3-year peak we saw in the graph before, because we're committed, right? And that's the only way you're going to get people to buy in. The other point I want to make is that absolutely vital that central government is part of the conversation, and my reasoning for it are twofold. One, they got us into this mess. The hydrology didn't change itself magically in the 1950s or so. And they signed up for the Ramsar Convention type stuff. So they've signaled and done all these things and then stepped away and given us this to manage. They are absolutely part of it. And I would say that if this Ramsar site was a person, as is the trend actually for some really important sites of nature in the world, that they do have personhood, or that we do look at the rights of nature to exist there, they would need a settlement of sorts to set things right. And so that would be my reasoning for bringing in central government absolutely from the beginning. I think I've made most of the points. I'll just check. I did worry as well with the commentary that it might, after those 2 years, result in more of, policy development information rather than the carrots we want to have people thinking about to make their own choices and their own self-determination. So just want to be really careful that the work is incentive and human language, not documents, reports, and policy language and outcomes. And also looking at timeframes that are post 10 years, because that was mentioned in there as long term. And I was thinking, well, it probably needs longer term than that as well, 30 to 80, for example, to be in line with Te Ture Whamana. And I appreciate you listening to that, because I think that's all my points. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. And I suppose just picking up on what you're saying around how do we signal to people that this is just the first stage of what could, as you rightly point out, Councillor Clarkson, be an enormous and expensive solution if our communities have appetite for that. And I suppose it ties into the earlier graphs we were talking about, Janine, with just the long-term financial implications, that we're not illustrating to our communities how all of these decisions being made are about longer-term outcomes. So I suppose the challenge to the team is, in our consultation document, how do we show that? How do we signal that this is all work leading to bigger aspirations? Please get on board. It's not just we'll look at it for a couple of years and then move on to the next thing we might look at.
Yeah, because I'm worried about spending $400,000 and then we've just spent. Yeah, and I think to get the buy-in, we need to single more. So I would like to propose that we signal something, even if it's the same amount for 4 years or 5 or 6 years, knowing we're going to go down the track of either the community catchment action management plans of those other really important sites, or to follow on from this, depending on what comes out. Because I acknowledge the uncertainty of the discussions.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, can I take that as an action on the board? Because I think there are a couple of things there, noting we've got 2 or 3 business cases that kind of stop abruptly in year 2, but there is implementation. Whether it is something, and Janine was talking about this with ELT last week, something that's notional, but is enough to send a signal, but telling that story around, so what next? The flip side is, if we come back and put in year 3 a number that had a B on the end of it, as Councillor Clarkson said, that's not prudent. But I think we can take it away and come with enough to put something notional in there that sends a signal that it is an ongoing investment.
Well, and I suppose it's the additional commentary that, like you say, there's a number of activities that we're engaged in that are sort of the scene setting stuff, right? It's the exploring the options, knowing that whatever options we take probably have financial impacts, right? So, all right, I see it being noted on the whiteboard over there. Fantastic. All right, we've got Councillor Cookson, then Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For this, it's the biggest thing is actually what are you trying to get from the lake, and what is it? What's the function? Because we can sit here and talk around all day, but if you want to restoration, what was it previously? How did it function? Because we've altered it by catchments, by more water coming in and everything else. So like, I don't know if consultants are going to fix any of this. All they're going to do is come back and say, these are a whole lot of things, issues. And then you spent $400,000 or $1 million and you're going to be sitting in the same place as you are right now. Nothing's changed. I'll guarantee it. Where most probably the better way of looking at it, you would go, okay, there's farming, agricultural land water that run into the lake. We need to divert that it runs to the edge of the lake and then goes down the Whangamarino and not through the lake, or something like that, that the water that's in the lake is the lake water and it's not being contaminated by things outside it and we can manage it. You know, you need to have a way better aspect of how you're going to make a concept of how this is going to function, is going to work, than just getting a bunch of consultants in and coming up with some ideas, because it's not going to work. I can guarantee you it will be flawed. We've seen this time and time again, and we'll be sitting here in 10 years' time arguing the same bloody thing, and they've walked away with $1 million worth of consultancy fees.
So I think the message is that we're very clear with if this goes ahead, that we're very clear that this is on identifying clearly what the options are.
Yeah,
And
Madam Chair, I've taken from the previous two conversations we've had with council about this, and just what Councillor Nichols said, it's not about policy options. It's not about another plan.
Yeah.
It's what are the options? What is the suite of options? It's not engaging consultants to come up with more bright ideas. They might have some ideas, but actually there's some smart people in this organisation. There's some smart people who have lived beside this for bit of the country for a very long time. But what we have done in the past is we've had a continuum, a random amassing of an idea here, one here, and one here. What the whole purpose of this is to bring that together in an integrated whole and go, here's the size of the problem. Here's some things that could fix it if you want this outcome. As Councillor Cookson said, if you want this outcome, here's a bunch of other things. Discuss. That's essentially what the scope of the report will be.
And it dovetails nicely into the work that's happened with stakeholders around our responses to incidents, right?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we will not be starting with a clean sheet of paper.
Yeah.
You know, sorry, that was a clean slate, clean sheet of paper. You know, there's so much to build on here foundationally. It's definitely not, there's so much that's happened over 50 years that it'll build on.
Okay, Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just picking up on your point there. If I see this business case is funded by a prior year surplus, which is one of the reasons it's only a 2-year thing. I'm supportive of this. I think it's important to do. If you wanted to show that it was an ongoing commitment, would a staff member, permanent, a designated Whangamarino staff member whose job was to, because initially this is about engaging with the community, that's what it says there, and carrying on that as a function.
It is part of it, the engagement.
Or is it
definitely.
important to have somebody external to council? That was your question.
I think it is important in this discovery phase and putting everything together to have somebody external to council. If we were to show intent and ongoing intent, it would require a dedicated person, mainly because everybody's day jobs around this organisations are pretty full. And if they're not full, something will pop up that means that's the next priority. So it would require a dedicated staff member. Where that staff member would sit, whether it's part of the directorate, which directorate it would sit in remains to be seen. Even if it is somebody who would sit here, it might be somebody who sits in one of the other agencies or one of our other partners.
Councillor Mahuta.
Oh, just to the points raised, yeah. I get where your frustration is, but I've got 12 years of reports like that, so we don't want any more. But one thing I know we haven't done, and we have partnered for all the work we've done, the river authorities put in just about as much investment. They have a different mandate to the council. So even though I'm one of them, I'm just saying we've never used the river authority within its act, within its authority over the vision and strategy, to drive, I guess, collaboration around Waikare and Whangamarino. So
Is this an opportunity to do
that,
that?
I think so, to
think so.
change the narrative a little bit,
think
Pamela,
so.
because we keep running against our same
Yep.
mandate limitation.
Yep.
Again, I'm not speaking for the other chair, but I just put that on the table. So kia ora.
Conveniently, we have both here. True, true. All right. Okay. All good? All good with that? No further questions? Yep. Okay, well, we're going to move on to lunch is in fact where we're going to move to. All right with that? Everybody okay with that? We will adjourn for, how long do you want? You want 20 minutes? You want 30 minutes? These are your choices. 30 minutes. Okay, we'll adjourn until 1:20 and we will come back for the water security management plan. Thank you.